This is Patrick Russell. I am interviewing Justin Graham for the first time. This interview is taking place on November the 5th, 2016. This interview is being conducted by the Making History Project. We're in Charleston, South Carolina. So Justin, tell me, you're with the Army, correct?
Yes.
All right, and tell me with whom you serve.
Currently, I'm in Bravo Company, 1st and 508th Infantry, Parachute Infantry Regiment. Currently, I've been in a battalion for about 8 years in a single battalion, starting out in Delta Company, and then going to the Scout Reconnaissance Platoon, and then served about 6 years there before coming to the current company that I'm in now.
All right, and take me back. Well, where were you born?
Mesquite, Texas, in July 1984. So.
All right. And what's Mesquite like?
Well, I didn't live in Mesquite. That's where I was born. But, it's Texas, suburb of Dallas. So it's, chaotic. It's around Dallas. So.
All right. Where do you live now?
Now, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. A town called Hope Mills, about 15 miles outside of Fort Bragg.
Okay. And tell me about how and when you joined the service.
Joined the service in 2005, December of 2005 actually, and when I have a brother, I have a couple siblings, but I have a full brother, and he lived with my grandmother growing up, so we kind of grew up more like cousins, and we both used to play Army like everybody does. We got a hold of some camo netting, and we put some paint on our face and run out and play soldier. And we used to play sniper. We get BB guns, and we put Power Rangers up on a fence post, and we try and call out, hey, left hand, or the belt buckle, and we try and hit that with a BB gun, with a scope and everything. And we so we always wanted to be snipers. We also pretended to be special forces. So when I got out of high school, I didn't really want to go into the Army. We talked about it as kids, but I didn't really want to lose that freedom to do what I wanted when I wanted and go where I wanted. So my brother, who's 2 years younger than me, when he went to graduate high school, he signed up at 17, got permission from my grandmother, who was his adopted parent, and joined. And so kind of felt a little guilty about that because I was the older brother. I'm supposed to lead the way as the older brother and be the example. And he joined no problem. And I went to his basic training graduation, and when I was there, we were in the hotel room and just hanging out, and he grabbed his black beret from basic training and put it on in the mirror to see what it looked like, and he came in and saw it, and he told me he made the joke. He's like, that's not the right color. He's like, the only thing you look good in is a green beret. And it just really stuck me in the heart. And so I went back home to Ohio, and a week later went to the recruiting office and signed up for an 18 X-ray contract to go to Special Forces. So you go through basic training, Airborne school, and then you go to Special Forces assessment selection and all that. So I went that route. And then...
How old were you?
I was 21 years old. And then, funny enough, my brother, he ended up going to Germany, and he was stationed in Germany in 1st Infantry Division. And then they reorganized the 3rd Battalion of 173rd Airborne, and they put them reorganized out of 1st Infantry Division in Germany. So my brother actually went from 1st Division to 173rd in Germany, and small world, when I went through Airborne school after basic training, I hear, hey, Justin Graham in the background. And I turn and look, and my brother was in my Airborne school class. So, that was kind of a small world, interesting thing. And I went on from there to selection, and then spent 2 years in the, almost 2 years in the Q course, which I ultimately failed out of and came to the 82nd Airborne. So.
And outside of the Green Beret, was there anything that made you want to go into Airborne?
I honestly never even really thought about Airborne. I mean, I knew soldiers jumped out of planes, but it really wasn't it wasn't anything I was really scared of. But it was one of those things that's like, hey, that'd be kind of cool to do, but it's not something I was necessarily passionate about. It was a box I had to check in order to go special forces. So there's no qualms about it. I had no fear of jumping out of an airplane. I ended up finding it to be rather fun. So I like the exhilaration and the nerves of getting out of the aircraft. So. I mean, now that I am a paratrooper, I have a lot of pride in it. Especially, I have about 48, 49. I think I might be over 50 jumps so far. So I have a lot of pride in being airborne now, and there's a lot of prestige that comes with it. But back then, I didn't really, I was just some cherry 21-year-old. I didn't really know what the history and the legacy of being a paratrooper and being airborne. And it was one of those boxes I had to check to go to SF, and I just never knew that, how rich that history was until really I came into the 82nd.
Okay. And now you love it.
I do.
And when did you enter into the service? What year?
2005.
2005.
In December, it was, basically, literally 2 days before the first, so it was basically 2006.
And where was your basic training?
Fort Benning, Georgia.
And how was it for you?
Well, it was exactly what I expected to be, get yelled at all the time. But I thought it was going to be harder than it was. Like, I thought I was, there was another company that was across from us. Were trying out something called stress cards, where if a soldier got stressed too much from a drill sergeant yelling at him or smoking him, he could pull out a stress card, and he had they had so many of them per month or per training cycle. So if they got too stressed out, they were allowed to go off to the side, and they didn't have to partake in that, ass chewing or smoking session, which I thought was just ridiculous, because it was one of those things where I thought, basic training is kind of a rite of passage, and if you're expected to go close with, destroy the enemy, and possibly give your life for the enemy, like, why are you going to complain about getting stressed in a training about environment that doesn't even really harm you in any way or any long-term effect? But it was easier than I thought it was going to be, and I saw those guys, and it was kind of, I don't know, it was a little, I heard stories from my grandfather of basic training and World War II and stuff, and other people in the past. My dad had 2 herniated discs because he went into the Navy and was in Navy basic, and he was doing push-ups, and a drill sergeant kicked him in his back, and obviously that guy's career was ended, but got mad, kicked him in his back, and herniated 2 discs. So, I heard all these stories about drill sergeants hitting people and all this stuff, and crawling through the mud with machine gun fire going inches above your head, and then I find out that really the fire is 6 feet above you. So it was not necessarily a letdown. It was just one of those things where I was like, oh, I don't know why people forgot about this. This is simple. You just got to endure it and get through it. So.
About how long was your training?
Basic training?
Yeah.
Oh shoot, I don't even know. That was a long time ago. It's 10 years ago. I know. I think 8 or 12 weeks. I'm between 8 and 12 weeks, I think.
And what do you do afterwards? You have advanced training?
Well, yeah. Well, the basic training I think was 6 weeks, and then you go into the AIT. Don't go beyond a 6-week thing. I can't really. For infantrymen, it's basically all one thing. For some other MOSs, they go through their basic, and then they actually have like a break, and their AIT is a completely different type of environment. Excuse me. But for the infantry guys down there, especially when I went through, and we got same drill sergeants, same company, like we were in the exact same place, we lived in the same place, we got a pass for 8 hours, and that was the only difference. We went on an 8-hour pass, came back, same life, just now we're in AIT. So I think it was maybe 12 weeks total between the two, maybe 10. I'm not 100% sure.
And do you have a specialty now?
Well, I have a lot of specialties. I, not pridefully saying this, but I have the most schools on my ERB, out of anybody in my battalion and probably my brigade. I've gone through a lot of different training, and the big three, especially being a scout platoon, was Ranger School, Sniper School, and RSLIC. RSLIC is a Reconnaissance and Surveillance Leaders course. It's a big school for you to go to as a scout recon guy. Just like Ranger School and Sniper, it has a super high attrition rate. It's considered a very prestigious school for infantrymen to get and go through because it's very limited slots, and only about a third of the class usually graduates. And I got all three of those under my belt and passed them all first time. And the only other person in our battalion to do that since I've been in the Army has been my squad leader at the time, Staff Sergeant Matthew Sitton, who died in 2012. And I think there's maybe 2 or 3 guys right now in the division that have all those 3 schools under the belt and qualifications. So those give you the identifiers, Victor for Ranger and Bravo 4 for Sniper, and I think it was 2 Bravo for Arslick. Because I've gone through Air Assault, and that gives you another identifier, and Jump Master gives me the whiskey. So I was a sniper for 6 years. I went through 2 different sniper schools. One of them was a civilian-run school in Arizona called McMillan, and then I went through the U.S. Army Sniper School afterwards. And I've been to, in order to train up for my 2014 deployment, we had to be the scout platoon. We got called on to be the PSD, the Personal Security Detail or Detachment for the 3-Star General Anderson and his, because he was the 18th Airborne Corps Commander, and his Sergeant Major. We had to do that detail for them. And so we went through HRP, it's High Risk Personnel School. It's usually an MP school for like high-level personal security. And so we went through that. So I had that specialty at the time as well. So currently I'm in a line company now, so I'm not currently serving as a sniper or as a PSD agent, but I still have all those qualifications.
And you've mentioned you've been deployed 3 times, correct?
Yes,
All right.
Afghanistan, all 3.
All right, and when was your first deployment?
2009, 2010. So I actually ended up, I graduated Ranger School, and I took just a little bit of leave and straight deployed because I left just a few weeks behind my guys. So I got talked into going to Ranger School right before deployment and foregoing the pre-deployment leave and all that. So yeah, they voluntold me to go to Ranger School, and I went and deployed right after.
And how was Ranger School? Tough?
It was physically demanding. I always tell people the most physically demanding school that I've gone through is Ranger School. The most emotionally difficult school was SEER School. Mainly the last 7 days of it when you're in a prison camp, and then probably the most mentally challenging school I went to was Sniper School. But Ranger School was, it was difficult, but it was doable. It was just one of those things that they put you in a position where you're tired, you don't get much sleep, you don't get much food, and they just see how you perform. And you just keep on driving on and have integrity, do the right thing, and try and help the guys around you as much as you can, even though you don't have much left yourself, and you'll be fine. And the guys around you will take care of you, and you just kind of pay it forward, helping other guys on their missions, and then when it's your turn, they'll help you out right back. It's usually the guys that start feeling sorry for themselves when they get tired or they get hungry that usually end up having problems, because then when they need it the most, the guys that they've let down in a school aren't going to bend over backwards to help them out. So they just kind of let them fail on their own. So but I had a good time at Ranger School. I had some good memories, but yeah, it was pretty difficult, especially mountains kind of broke me off. So first time I walked up the mountain, they call it the Stairway to Heaven, and you just go up and up and up, and I thought that was a hugely steep mountain. They broke me off, and then I found out that that's like the least steep ascent that we're going to do in mountain phase. So it was definitely a wake-up call, but it was something that's very, the reward at the end of it is much higher the more you suffer to get it, I think. So if it would have been easy, it wouldn't mean as much. So
there's a lot of pride in getting these different achievements. To be a Ranger, right?
Yeah, there definitely is.
It's an elite class.
It is, and it's. I try and push people to go. Mainly, there's the whole Ranger. There's some guys in the Army that are just like Ranger. You're if you're not a Ranger, you're not a good soldier. But I just try and talk people into it because number one, if I can walk into a room with a bunch of sergeant majors and generals. And if I have a Ranger tab and they have a Ranger tab, we have common ground. And those guys will just shoot the shit with me and talk to me. It's a small group in the club. I instantly have rapport with those guys. It just makes it much easier to work with certain individuals sometimes, because you already have that common ground. And when you walk into a room and you have a Ranger tab, usually that person is a first sergeant or sergeant major. They look at you and they see the tab, and they know that you have what it takes, and they know that you already have earned some respect. So that first impression of you, they don't have to look at you and kind of gauge, is this guy worth anything? They already know that you are. You just have to maintain that and show them that you they're not wrong from the first assessment. So.
And from your 3 deployments, which of the 3 had the most impact on you, if you can?
That's actually a very hard question to answer. They all had a very big impact on me in different ways. I guess I'll summarize and try and clarify a little bit. So my first deployment, that popped my cherry. I saw combat for the first time within 2 weeks of being there, and it was the first time that I saw a dead body and all that, which I thought I'd have more of a reaction to it. It really, when somebody's trying to do your guys harm, you got to do what you got to do. So we took the guys out, and that was that. And it's a little longer story, but I won't go into that right now. But my first deployment, I lost some good friends. And most of the things that affected me were more the friends that I lost than the carnage that I saw. I mean, that stuff affects you too sometimes. But I had 2 guys, a guy Sherman and Islip. They drowned in the deployment in RC West because they're trying to recover some CDS bundles that got dropped in for the resupply, and the guy got his glove caught. It was on the edge of a river and got something caught in the risers, and it pulled him with him. With it when it fell into the river, and the other guy tried jumping in after him, and they couldn't get their body armor off because of all the kit that they had on top of their body armor, and they both drowned. And it took them almost 2 weeks to find one of the guys' bodies, and a villager brought his body back, washed up downstream like 7 or 8 miles on the back of a donkey. So that was rough, especially because it's one thing to give your life for your country in combat. It's another thing to drown in a river, something that is completely by accident, and it wasn't caused by the enemy. I think that was one of the rougher times in that deployment. And then I lost a guy that was my training partner. He's a civilian guy, ex-Ranger guy. His name was Ryan, and he, big jacked guy, tattooed arm sleeves, and we do jiu-jitsu. I was teaching jiu-jitsu, and he was working out with me. And he went to go out one day. It's a civilian guy. They drove some high-level civilian people around, and they were just in SUVs. They hit an IED, and he was a quad amputee. His left leg was at the knee, and left arm at the elbow, and then his right side was at the shoulder and the hip. And he bled out and didn't make it. So that was, we were supposed to work out after we got back from that mission. So then finding out about that, having to go to the airfield and receive him off the helicopter and help get his body where it needed to go to you can get on the way back home, and having to the roughest part about that is you lose a friend, and you have them and they're in pieces, but then you have to gather the pieces. So you get the guy, and you have to make sure that all of his appendages get with his body, and it's just kind of rough. So that the end of that deployment, I had a very big. The biggest thing that happened was we were on this ANCOP headquarters. I don't remember the acronym. It's like Afghani National something Police. It's a division of the police in Afghanistan, and their headquarters was in Kandahar, and we stayed there, and we got attacked, and they blew up basically a view bed next to the base, and went in. They came in and started throwing grenades into tents and the bunkers, and ended up being 4 Americans died and 6 Afghani interpreters, and there were about 15, 16 people that were wounded in action there as well. And I had an RPG blow up about 3 feet in front of my face, and when I kind of sat up and came to for a second. Went to run in a tent and had shrapnel in my forearm that caught the tent as I went in, and that's when I realized, like, oh shit, like I had something there. And so that's, I had that go on there. But that didn't even really bother me too much. It's just, more worried about securing the place and getting these guys out of our base and taking care of the casualties we had. Like, just wrap that up and, keep driving on. Like, there were guys that was nothing. It was all superficial. There's guys that were, a lot worse off. They're a bunker that had, a bunch of interpreters in it, and we had to go in and get the bodies out, and there was a grenade body that the fuse had broken off, so it could have blown up. So we had to, kick everybody out, and I had to go in and just get body after body after body out. And, one of the guys ended up still being alive, so we had to try and save him. So it was more like, you got to, like, take care of that stuff. You can't really worry about a little bit of light, scratches. So, I was affected by that, that stuff, having to, save some of the guys there. One of the guys that died, Christopher Stout, good. He was a chaplain's assistant, the first person in the ministry corps to die since Vietnam, and he just walked out of the tent, and a grenade happened to be under where he stepped, and he died. And we had prayed together about an hour before the attack happened, so that was kind of rough because it's rough when your brothers go down in the infantry, but somebody that was, a chaplain's assistant, it's just circumstance, they happen to end up dying. It was it's just kind of, those are the harder ones to deal with, because it just sucks that somebody gets caught, somewhere that was just a random event, stepping over a grenade. So, but that happened about a month before we were supposed to redeploy. So that, the mood throughout the rest of the deployment was just bad, because we still had to live there. And a suicide bomber had come in and tried going to our talk, and we shot him. And so while he was wounded, he detonated himself about 25 feet from us. And so we had to pick up all the pieces over the next 2-3 days. There were pieces of brains, on the tent. It looked like just grease spots where the sun on the tent would just, grease would soak into the tent. So we had to go around and, pick up that. So it was, losing, 4 lives, and then having a bunch of people wounded, and it was a mass cow situation. And other guys came in. There was a bunch of other units that came out to support us and help secure everything for us. But just having to afterwards go around and pick up pieces of somebody, when that happened, that was just a very depressing way to end our deployment. So definitely that affected me. But then my second deployment, I lost 2 of my best friends. Staff Sergeant Matthew Sitton, that I mentioned prior, is the only other guy than myself in the battalion that had Ranger, Sniper, and RSLIC as qualifications. He was with our first sergeant, who also died, and our first sergeant in this village stepped on an IED, and a particular IED. So there was nothing left. All we could recover was about 3 trash bags worth of pieces. And Sitton, was standing about probably 3-4 feet away from him, and he amputated his arm, and he got thrown over a wall into a tree because of the dust cloud. Nobody knew where he was, and they ended up finally they heard him moaning. Sorry. And but there were so many dismounted IEDs in that area, they would use just a water bottle, and they'd fill it with HME, and it would take somebody's foot off, or their leg off, or both feet. So you had to clear to get to where his body was, because if you just ran over to him and climbed this wall, and by the time you got around there, you would end up taking 2-3 more casualties. So by the time they got to him, he bled out and he died. And then I got a hold of my ex and to let her know, and she informed me. Excuse me. Because she knew Matthew Sitton. He was like a really, really good guy. And so tried to let her know, and then she informed me that my other buddy, who was in 7th Special Forces Group, his name was Andrew Britton Mahalo, he had died about a month prior to that. In an attack that I heard about, I heard that the Special Forces, their Afghan army guys turned guns on the Americans, blue on green attack, and I knew that one SF guy was killed and a couple were wounded, but they don't put out the names. And then that's how I found out, literally hours after I lost my squad leader, that Andrew had died. He got shot in the neck from a tower while they were walking onto the Afghani section of the base, and there's nothing really could be done for that, so he bled out. So that was kind of a rough day, especially because the refrigerator Connex that we had to put any bodies or body waste in to send, because you have to store them and keep them cool so that you can send them to Kandahar, and then his body gets escorted and flown back to the United States to his family, but they need to keep it cool. And the Connex was broken, so we, some civilians finally said, hey, we've got a freezer that you guys can use. So I was thinking it was a Connex. So we get on a gator, and we drive. So we've got his body draped over the front of the gator like a deer. I mean, it's, not to make that analogy, but that's kind of how it felt. And it's just really frustrating to have to put your buddy like that, And so we drive him out there. It ended up being like a deep freezer. So I'm like, wow, I'm not going to fold him up and put him in a deep freezer. So we finally ended up getting just a tons of bags of ice and keeping his body cool so we could get it home to his family. And so that was kind of a rough time. Losing our first sergeant and, one of my good friends, and then finding out that my other good friend, which I was supposed to go to Florida, since 7th Group moved to Florida. When I got back from the deployment, we had plans to go to Florida, hang out with him and his wife down there, and have a good time in Florida. So that was like a double shot to the face in that. And I guess kind of the roughest part about that too is you're trying to tell a family, because in World War II, guys, they could write letters home, but they were, they're kind of in their own world over there. In Afghanistan now, I mean, you are in your own world, but when you go back to the base, you can go get on a phone and you can call your mom, or you can call family. So, it's you want to talk to somebody about it, but you don't know how to. But you're trying to be a good, some guys are trying to be a good husband, or you're trying to be a good friend, or trying to communicate with your family. But if you do talk about any of that, it's just very difficult. It's there's it's a very blurred line between the deployment and the non-deployment life, and it's sometimes it almost feels like you're on vacation on deployment, not on vacation, but you're over there, but it's it's almost like you're on a vacation waiting to come home. You're just having to do things that are a little rough. So it's kind of hard that you're trying to talk to family and try and act normal, and it's almost like you got to act normal, like you're not bothered by things that go on, and trying to talk to family, or them emailing you and you just lost or found out that you lost two of your good friends, and it's just trying to keep it together while also pretending that it's not affecting you is a little bit rough, I think, for some of the guys that are over there, because it's a little confusing, because on one hand you want to break that wall that you put up while you're on deployment. You kind of you let it down a little bit when you're talking to your family, but you still kind of got to keep that up with your family. It's just very confusing, I think, emotionally for some guys, because if they let the wall down, things affect them more. If they keep it up, then they're kind of abrasive with their family, and it's hard to balance that out, I guess, if you know what I mean. So that deployment definitely affected me in that way. But then so first deployment, I just lost friends. Second deployment, I lost, friends, but squad leader and first sergeant. And in my third deployment, which was a security detail deployment, and I was hoping we wouldn't lose anybody because we weren't going out and looking for the enemy. And I was a squad leader and lost one of my soldiers, Joseph Riley. They were going out on the command sergeant major for 18th Airborne Corps wanted to go to the Afghan Army base. So they went out, and they went to roll out, and there was a motorcycle that was parked off of the path. It was like a dirt road path, and it had a EFP, the shaped charge on it. And when they went by it, it detonated, and it threw that shaped charge into the truck. And those shaped charges can go right through vehicles. And they were in an up-armored SUV, like a Suburban, up-armored, and the glass was, this thick. But it went right through it. It put a hole about this big. And the only thing, Riley was driving, and the only thing that was left was basically his bottom jaw. It hit him right in the side of the head and just went right through. And the guy in the passenger seat, Jack Moneymaker, got shrapnel like all, and he's okay now, but he was in Walter Reed for a good year and a half, and he's got a lot of damage. He has just shrapnel scars all up and down his legs, and a lot of the shrapnel was from bone matter from Riley. So, and the worst part about that was that I had some family issues and things going on, and so they were trying to cut down on the number of personnel in Afghanistan. And they told me they wanted to send me back a little bit earlier than the rest of my guys. And I was really, struggling, like, well, what happens if something happens to one of my guys? If I go home early and something happens to one of my guys, like, I'm not going to be able to, to cope with that. And the 18th Airborne Corps Sergeant Major promised me, he told me, it's getting into deployment, and I know that, I'm going to be in Croatia for a while, and then I'm going to come back to the state, and I'm going to go back to the States, and I'm coming back, and then, it's going to be wrapping up the deployment. I probably won't even really be going anywhere. So, don't worry about it. Just go home, go deal with your family issues you got going on, and these guys are, these guys will be fine. Sought out my platoon sergeant, who I respected very well. His name was Sergeant Jacob Gilmer. Now he's a first sergeant. And, he advised me, hey, man, go home. Like, it's fine. Like, this isn't really a combat deployment. I mean, we're personal security. Like, you'll be okay. Go home. So I went home. And then I was back here, back in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and then it comes down that Riley died. So I dealt with a lot of guilt because of that. And that was really, really hard to work through. And that's what encouraged me to actually go talk to somebody for PTSD related issues. So because I found that think about it a lot. I'd have hypersensitivity. I'd had issues like that through the other deployments, but it really came to a head after that, because just the emotional impact that had on me really made me where I really would get to where I just couldn't function or do anything. Like, I just wanted to sit. I didn't want to mow the grass. I wanted to. I would put it off. I'd be like, I'll do it later. I just don't feel like it. And then 3 months go by and I haven't mowed the grass. I haven't done things that I normally would do. I had a reef aquarium. It was kind of a hobby of mine, and I would water changes on that thing. Every weekend I'd do a water change on it. I'd maintain it. I'd always be getting new stuff for it, and it's almost like a garden, cultivating it. And then after that happened, I didn't do a single water change for a year. I didn't do anything. Like, my stuff almost died. I just left it. It's just I just couldn't function normally, I guess. So I thought, I need to go try and talk to somebody about it. But I ended up giving a speech at his funeral, and because a lot of our guys were back when that happened, he was one of the last guys to leave. Our platoon had the honor of being able to drive to Ohio and do the funeral, and be the honor guard for his funeral, and be the pallbearers for his funeral, and spend time with his family, and it was like a great honor. But it was also really rough because the other deployments, you lose one of your buddies, and you put his buddy onto an aircraft and he's gone, and then it's back to work. Like, I mean, you can cry later. You got things to do. There's security to happen. Like, things need to get picked up. Vehicles need to get recovered. We need to get new equipment. We need to clean our equipment. We need to, go pull security. There's other things that need to be done. And we'll have a memorial ceremony later, and tears will be shed at that. I have no embarrassment in shedding tears, for buddies lost. Like, I mean, when Sid died, I felt like a baby. Like, somebody told me it was going to be okay, and I just broke down and just started, like, I couldn't even talk. But it's different when you can actually go to the funeral. And the hardest thing that I think I've ever had to do in the Army was give a speech at Riley's funeral, and in front of his mom and his dad and his brother and his sister, and see, the look in their face and their eyes watering up as I talked. And, like, I don't know how I got through the speech without breaking down, because every time I tried to practice the speech, I broke down. Like, I couldn't keep dry eyes. Especially, dealing with that guilt and stuff. So, but, it was really difficult, but it was really an honor to be able to do that for him, because every other, friend that I've ever lost has been do a memorial ceremony to the memory of him, and you have the boots, the rifle with the helmet on it, and, leave a token for his family, and then that's it. You don't get to come back and see the funeral. you can visit his grave later, but that's about it. But this one we actually got to do the funeral for him, and I mean it was good, and it was an honor for his family, but it was also very rough because it's something we've never had to experience before. So then I ended up getting through the guilt of coming home early by I apologized, even though I knew that knew there wasn't really any reason I needed to. It wasn't my fault, but I had to talk to his dad and his mom and just apologize to him. And even though I just told him, hey, this happened, and if I don't know if I would have made a difference, but I feel horrible because if I was there, maybe we would have different. You always what if things. It's like maybe we would have taken a different route, or maybe I would have talked to Sergeant Major into doing a different thing for security, or going a different route, or flying in a helicopter instead of driving. So you kind of what if those things. And his family are just really good Christian people, and they just gave me a hug, and like, hey, there's nothing to forgive, man. So that was one of the best ways that I had of working through that, was just kind of laying it out there for him and apologizing. And even though I really knew intellectually that I didn't really have anything to apologize for, because it's war and things just happen, but emotionally I just kind of, I guess, needed them to affirm that there was nothing that I did wrong. So, but yeah.
And how are you doing now?
Okay now. Still have sleeping issues sometimes. If I have to sleep with a loud fan, any loud noise that happens, even though I know it's nothing, if it's a loud noise, even remotely, like an explosion or gunshot, my heart starts racing. I surge with adrenaline. So I'll be laying in bed, and if something all of a sudden, something backfires, or a door slams somewhere in the house, I'm like, there goes the next 2 hours. I'm not gonna be able to sleep now. It's instantly I know, hey, well, that was a door slamming, but it's just can't help it. And one of the deployments, we had an issue where some guy stepped an IED in a field of marijuana. There was Afghans that went through this field of marijuana, and some guy stepped on an IED, and we had to go out there because guys were screaming. We had to go out there and recover them, and we had to, again, with a minesweeper, clear our way out there to him as he was screaming, and then put tourniquets on his legs, and they were both gone at the knees. And and so that, like, I've never done a drug in my life, never really been around marijuana, but some people occasionally, you'd be in traffic and somebody will come out of their car and you smell that smell. So now that just like triggers like, flashbacks of me seeing that guy's legs look like hamburger, and just like, hearing him scream the way he did, and it just makes me remember that stuff. And so sometimes I'll just go on a drive, like if any of that stuff gets triggered, or I'll just go off of my own thoughts, just think about things, remember things, remember guys, and good memories from people. So I can't really read war books really anymore. I take my mind to more science fiction because it just doesn't, I don't know, it just brings back too much, memories, reading things. Occasionally I'll go to movies like Lone Survivor, or I just watched Hacksaw Ridge, but things like Lone Survivor, American Sniper was hard because I was a sniper. I was a Navy SEAL, and obviously I didn't have near as many kills as that guy did. But the family, I was previously married, so the family and the whole family dynamic back home, and dealing with it, and that disconnect when you get back home, and kind of liken deployment a little bit because it's a little bit freer. There's not the garrison environment and all the rules and regulations, and the tedious oversight. It's a little bit more big boy rules, and you're kind of doing what you were kind of designed and bred to do in the Army. So it's kind of fulfilling. There's all that stuff that goes on, the emotions, and so like watching that movie was really rough, and then especially in the end of it, seeing pictures from that, and Lone Survivor. At the end of the movie, they show pictures of the guys that died, and one of it's like the wedding video from one of the guys, and like that, like even thinking about, like if I think about anything randomly, like tears well up in the back of my eyes. I have to suppress it, like if even the smallest thought of anything comes up. So that stuff, like I just couldn't help but cry, and nobody said a word when we left the theater. It was like the quietest end to a movie I've ever seen. So it's definitely affects me. Sometimes I lose sleep. Sometimes I get complacent, or I get in a mood where I'm not like whatever else doing, there's no hope of finishing that. I just need to go get my mind on something else and relax. So But overall, I mean, it's something that I'm learning to deal with. I'm trying to go through this PTSD program. It's like a 12-step program, but I got to the first step, and I've been so busy with different training. I went to JRTC in Louisiana. I'm working on getting back in. I got to get back into an appointment to go over the first step assignment with the guy. So it's something I'll be working through, and it'll be a work in progress, I'm sure. But so far, talking about it helps. It's hard to talk about it with certain family members because they don't really understand, and you can't go into detail. I mean, if you do go into detail, you get that look from them of, when you're talking about casualties and you explain it, you're talking about somebody's picking up pieces of somebody's brains, or somebody's getting shrapnel that was a piece of somebody else's skull. It's something that it kind of shocks them a little bit, so you can't really talk about that. And I think that sometimes that level of detail is kind of what you need to kind of help get it off your shoulders, I guess. So, because so many guys, especially now, they'll talk about it, but they either talk about it in a macho way, like they need to, be the alpha male and act like it doesn't bother them, or they talk about it in a mission briefing type of way, first we did this, and then we executed this maneuver, and then we took these casualties, and then we did, and they talk about it like it's a debriefing, and they don't talk about it with any emotional weight whatsoever. So I think just my experience working through some of it, talking about it, is that actually talking to somebody in detail about some of the things. For instance, my second deployment, one of the things that really, really affected me was we had these blimps that we used, and we would video and we'd look with thermals, and it was kind of for our intel. And we looked on one of the ranges that we had, because we were on this fog that we're breaking down, and there's a range that went up the mountainside, and there was fence that went up both sides. And we look on the PTIDs, which is that blimp system, and they see that there's kids up there. And we've been shooting Mark 19 rounds, which are 40 millimeter HE rounds. And these kids, there was one kid that had a bag, it looked like a rucksack with a frame. And the other smaller kids, he was having go around and pick up unexploded shells and put them in the backpack. And so we shoot him off the range. It turns up about 2 hours later, all of a sudden a van rushes, we were about to fire on it. We thought it was a VBED. And then we see that there was 12 people in this van, rushes up to our base, and guys get out and they're frantic, they're crying, Afghanis. And one dude comes out and he's carrying a 6-year-old little girl. And she's just maimed. Her joint of her shoulder is blown wide open. You can see the joint. She's got shrapnel in her skull, and you can tell that it went through the skull. You can see brain matter sticking out. And a couple other shrapnel. And then a kid, he was, I think, 8. He had shrapnel in his leg, in his crotch. And, these guys, they tried to say that we had 8, high explosive rounds in our trash, and the kids were going through the trash. It wasn't really the case, because we recovered. They brought some of the rounds back, and it turned out that the kid, he was 14 years old, probably trying to get stuff to Taliban, took those rounds and had a screwdriver and a hammer and was hammering into them, trying to get the explosives out. And he hammered on one of them, and it blew the other ones up, and there were 8 kids around. So actually, I think there were 10 kids. There were 8 of them died instantly, and the other 2 they brought to us. And we were able to save the 8-year-old, but the 6-year-old we weren't. And I'd already been through one deployment. I'd already seen a lot of stuff. I'd already had to do things like a medic, even though I wasn't qualified as a medic. So we had medics that were cherries. They had never seen a casualty on this second deployment, because we were kind of breaking this fob down, and we weren't really in too many combat scenarios. And so we take the 6-year-old little girl in there, and these guys just act like, what do I do? And so me as an infantryman, and as an E5 sergeant, I had to take these guys by the neck and be like, you start an IV on her, you get the close cut off her, you do this. And it was something they should have been doing as a medic. And they couldn't get an IV, so I tried to get the IV. Her airway wasn't opening because her throat and tongue were all swollen, so they're trying to get a breathing tube down her neck, and she's a 6-year-old girl, it won't fit. So, I'm having to be like, hey man, you get a nasopharyngeal tube, and I'm trying to get them to get that and force that down her throat because it won't fit in her nose because it's too big because she's 6. So and then we ended up losing her. She was too far gone. So her veins had already collapsed. And so seeing just a 6-year-old little girl that I had I had friends that had kids. So just watching a 6-year-old little girl die from something like that is just kind of one of those things that kind of is haunting sometimes. And I can't imagine having a 6-year-old little girl and something like that happening. So anytime I go anywhere and I see kids that are 6 years old, like that image comes to my mind of that kind of 6-year-old body just maimed. It's just something that you just have to, you can't really forget or prevent. It's just one of those things you just gotta learn how to cope with. So
Well,
and
I want to thank you for sitting, and I hope this has been helpful as well, sitting with me. I wish you all the best in terms of getting through that 12-step program. Mm-hmm. If you've gone through all the other schools that you've gone through, I know you can do this one. Mm-hmm. And if you put your efforts the same way you did to do the other ones, there's nothing that you can't conquer. So work on it, man.
I will. Thank you.
All right, so thanks.